Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to the MindTrace Podcast, episode number 7. I'm your host, Ajmal Savari, and today we'll look into the science of language with our guest, Vitoria. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MindTrace Podcast. In this podcast, we're bridging the gap between science and its application in UX. We're having conversations with guests from these two worlds, all with the aim of figuring out the UX of certain industries, how UX can use scientific discoveries, what UX industries can learn from each other, and what questions UX has for science. Our guest today is Dr. Vitoria Piai. Vitoria is a senior researcher at the Donders Centre for Cognition and the Radboud University Medical Centre. Her research focuses on language function healthy and neurological populations such as stroke, brain tumor, epilepsy, and neurodegenerative disorders such as dementia or Parkinson's. She pays special attention to the intersection of language and other functions such as executive control, memory, like semantic memory, and motor control in the case of speaking. She uses a bi-directional approach where she uses models from cognitive neuroscience to better understand language function in the neurological populations, while at the same time using observations of the breakdown of language in those populations as unique insights to improve the models from cognitive neuroscience. For her work, she has received multiple grants, amongst which are the Rubicon Grant, the Dutch Veni Grant, and the Junior Principal Investigator Premium. Her awards range from getting the Early Career Award 3 times from 3 different research societies, the Top Review Award, and the award for the top 10% of review contributions to the field of psychology. The list goes on and on. In this conversation, we talk about the science of language. How does language work? What is language, and how does it impact us every day? We discuss how language makes us uniquely human, and where do the borders lie, if there are any. We also talk about the overlaps of language and memory. Okay, enough background. Let's get into it, shall we? Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined by Vitoria. We haven't seen each other for a while. Actually, that's not true. Was it 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. And before that, we hadn't seen each other for a while.
Yeah, because you've been in the United States. Yeah. And before that, we met actually here at the Donders Institute during my master's.
Right, it was already at that time.
Yeah, that's some time ago.
2009, right?
Yeah, 2009.
That's,
Yeah.
That's how we first met. Yeah.
Yes. And well, today is supposed to be about the science of language. Well, or the specific focus that this conversation will take.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And you know, when I did this little bit of research, I realized there was one thing about you that I never asked you, because you speak a shitload of languages.
Right.
And I never asked you how come.
Yeah, so I don't think it was a very deliberate thing from the start. So growing up, going to school in Brazil, you get English and Spanish, just kind of regular, and it isn't really good if you do it at school. But I've always been interested in learning.
Do you get that
languages
standard-wise?
Yeah.
From primary school already?
I don't remember really. I think from maybe when we are... I could be saying something that doesn't make more sense anymore also because it's been a long time, but maybe from when you're 12 or something.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's pretty early.
Yeah, I guess. And it's usually not a very good level unless you go to more privileged schools, I guess. But I went to a private school for English as well, and Spanish in school. And then because we have the Italian citizenship in my family, I thought it didn't make much sense at all to have an Italian passport and not speak Italian. So when I was about, I think, 16, I started taking Italian lessons. So that's how the Italian came on the list. So it's not really that I said, no, I have to learn more languages. And then when I was 18, I moved to Belgium, and there I learned French. And then eventually I moved to the Netherlands, and then I was already in Belgium learning Dutch as well. And later, because my husband is Swedish, I learned Swedish. So I think the only languages that I really kind of forced, but that I really deliberately made the choice, I will learn this language, was with Italian and Polish.
You also know Polish?
Some, not anymore as I used to, but I still speak a tiny bit. Yeah, and I find it really fascinating.
Okay, I didn't even know you spoke Italian. I had no idea. I knew Swedish was on the list. Brazilian, of course, Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed you speak Spanish, but I didn't know that either. Whoa.
But we said you speak lots, but you had no idea.
Well, I knew the number.
The number, but not what they were.
Exactly.
But then it's not that impressive, right? When you realize it's, 4 of them are Romance languages.
Well, come on.
And then English, Swedish, and Dutch, they are so similar anyways. And then all of us, to me, it's not impressive because these are all very, related languages. So it's not like Polish is a real challenge because vocabulary-wise, there's very little I can use from the other languages. Grammar-wise, it's quite complex. So that to me is a real challenge. These other languages, I don't really count as being something very special or something. Yeah.
Well, that must be just you, because I barely know people who speak just one Roman language who'd be like, just adding another one is fine. That's not a challenge.
Yeah.
Like it is for them. But I think that's great. I noticed this as well when I was learning Dutch, that at some point I could guess my way through the vocabulary of the language, just getting a feel for, okay, this word, I have to know what this word is. I don't know what it is in Dutch. Would this be maybe German origin or English origin? And then I just got very good at figuring that out. And if nobody corrected me, I just like, I guess that was it.
They probably understood me.
Yeah, they understood me. And then you just keep going. That's how I brute forced my Dutch.
But in a way, it's very nice, right? Because it does tell you that there are some intrinsic rules in there that you are learning implicitly, and then you're just using them yourselves, right? So at some point, you just learn that that's how words are formed. Probably there's some rule through time that, German and Dutch, once they shared that common Proto-Germanic language, and then they came about to be as they are because of some rules or some changes over time. That's probably something that you were able to pick up on and use now as well, right? So it's actually really cool.
But in all honesty, I consciously have no idea what's happening.
No, exactly.
I'm just, to all I know, I'm just guessing my way through it.
Yeah.
And I just realized the likelihood of me guessing right is increasing, but the underlying mechanism, no idea.
Yeah.
Just really no idea. I noticed this with, because I speak Farsi as well. And while I was learning Dutch, the Farsi was helping me a lot in my Dutch pronunciation. Because as a German, if you were to use German pronunciation in Dutch, it sounds terrible. So to all Germans, you really need to fix that. You sound terrible in Dutch. Some effort. Come on. I really don't like German accent in a foreign language. Might just be me. Others might not care so much. But the Farsi really helped me to, especially the ch sound,
right,
was very easy for me to create. But what was very difficult was the large amount of consonant combinations Dutch has that the German doesn't have, where it just really, this was hard.
Really? German doesn't? I thought German had, well, I think Dutch has quite a certain level of complexity that is even further than the German, but I think German also has some of those consonant clusters there.
Yeah, exactly. It's these, I think it was just that I wasn't used to it. It's specifically this the German doesn't have that.
No, exactly.
It's and just moving from the front of your mouth to the back, and then that took me quite some time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. And Farsi is quite regular in Portuguese, for example. Most of our syllables are just going to be one consonant, one vowel, one consonant, one vowel. So it's very kind of simple for most of the vocabulary, and that I think. It's also why when people from Brazil speak English, they will add certain sounds to the end of words, because our syllables have to follow that particular rule.
I see.
And then you just add that to so that it conforms to what you're used to in your mother tongue.
So it stays in the flow, basically.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I was always wondering why some people do that. I never thought it's because of that. Just thought maybe it's just a cultural thing.
No. It's definitely your mother tongue, like rules from your mother tongue that you're just, like, I don't know for what reason, if people really realize, but you just apply them when producing
well, that's cool.
A foreign language as well.
But about the Farsi, I can't answer your question. I have no idea. I don't know. I never learned how to read or write. I can speak it. And if you were to ask me something specific, I would have to reverse engineer it to give you an answer. And most of the time I do that. But then it takes me like 10 minutes.
So let's not do that now.
Let's not do that now.
I can consult Wikipedia later.
yes, maybe that's better. But wow, I think you speaking so many languages is impressive. And I understand though where you're coming from, specifically with the generalization aspect of it. And is it that what fascinates you about language so much? Is the underlying complexity which is shared?
No, actually not. So when I was doing my studies, what attracted me at first to studying languages was really, I think, rules and how they are, like how some of these rules are the same across languages, or how languages evolve and they follow certain patterns, all of these things. But then I quite soon noticed when studying linguistics that I kept asking the question, but how do people actually do it? You have all of these rules, but as we are speaking, we are applying all of these things and they're just coming out so fast and so naturally. How do speakers actually do it? How do we actually find the word we want to produce? So I noticed that was the question. Those were the questions that really fascinated me. How it is that I come to a word and I get that word out. And that's what made me go more towards what we call psycholinguistics rather than linguistics, right? Yeah. Linguistics is more descriptive. What are the rules that allow you to combine words or, combine sounds, etc., or put words in a sentence? Where psycholinguistics is more about what is really going on in the head of the speaker, what the psychology behind language, how we use it, how we comprehend it, etc. Right. So those are the questions that fascinate me more so than the rules. Even though I find the rules really cool, I think ultimately it's about how we use the rules themselves or the words.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that you say that, because I just remember my linguistics classes in horror. I loved language back then, and I thought this would be cool, and then they just dried. For me, they dried the greatness of the topic out. And I was just sitting there, I was thinking, oh my God, I don't think I like anything about language anymore. Until I, by accident, stumbled into a computational linguistics class. And then I could see how you could actually apply all of that thinking. But at the beginning, I was just thinking, what are you doing to this topic?
But what was it? Was it things like, this is morphology and these are the rules for morphology? And this is,
exactly. It was then you had the morphology, you had the semantic trees, you had then you had the particles, and then you had how does this fit into that together? Right. And which I can understand that you need some type of approach to study it. I understand that now. Yeah. But back then I would have really liked for the lecturer to say that rather than to just start talking and not say what this is for. Right. Why is it done this way? So unfortunately, my passion for studying language went away.
Died there at that point.
It died at the beginning, unfortunately. But I have a good friend, Christian, and he was always into languages. And he was also a lot into computational models. So we have been looking into these things. We've been debating a lot. And I think it's interesting that you say that you found the psychological aspect about this more interesting. Because I think you're right. You have all these rules, but so just thinking about this now myself, how come even now in this conversation, I'm not explicitly thinking about following any rules. I'm just speaking. I'm not searching for words. I'm not doing any of those things. And yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the one of the big questions. How it's something I guess in some ways we are doing all of that all the time, right? It's just that we are really good at applying those rules as we need them, and for certain things also it's used so much that at some point it may be that some things are stored in memory already as bigger chunks, and you just use that rather than always computing everything as you need it. So we also know that for many things they're overly used. You don't need to always be applying the rules over and over again, but you rather have chunks of information already stored in that particular way.
You mean like sentences or?
Yeah, it could even be, kind of these more, stereotypical sentences. Like one of the ways you can see this is it's really fascinating, actually. So you have people who have brain damage, and then they acquire a language disorder due to that. So some people won't be able to speak at all anymore. They may be able to produce, 5 or 6 words, but they can sing happy birthday, and they can curse, and they can produce these stereotypical
the cursing
utterances.
Would be me.
Yeah. What did you say?
The cursing would be me. I'm sure I could still curse.
Yeah, right. But because these things, maybe the cursing has also all of the emotional
attachment.
Right. That makes them be slightly different. But you do find these stereotypical utterances that can still be produced, even though they cannot produce any sentence that really requires the combination of different words into a sentence, for example, right? But they can, if they are singing happy birthday, they can sing the entire thing. But then they cannot produce any one of those words in isolation if they would have to, if they would want to.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this does tell us something about how certain things are really stored as a chunk entirely.
This reminds me of, that you say that now, it reminds me of this one patient that was also studied here at the Department of Parkinson's Research, who had, when you have Parkinson's at a later stage, you have all these tremors and you have problems initiating movement, controlling movement. But that person, as soon as he was sitting on the bicycle, no problem. He could just cycle like in complete flow and with quite some movement complexity, which a normal cyclist can't even do. And the physicians were, dumbfounded. Literally, it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And do you think there's some overlap in this type of mechanism? Because it seems low level, right? I'm not saying that Parkinson's and language is the same.
Yeah, but I would say, I don't know, for biking and walking, in both cases, it's a certain pattern that is overlearned, right? So it could be, rather than that the case, I don't know, this was it a static bicycle?
No, it was really
Yeah.
on that. They went to the parking because his wife said he's fine when he's cycling. So, but the physician, no one believed it. And then they went on the parking lot, and then he was on the bicycle. They helped him onto the bicycle, and then he started, and they just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was also, so they had a video of this. I thought this was fake.
Yeah.
That's how it looked like. Yeah. Because that's not what you normally hear of Parkinson's patients.
Right, no. There's also this, so I don't know. I don't think in this case it's really more, because I would say walking is just as automatic and overlearned, and you don't need to think about the rules. But maybe there is something about the emotional part of it, right? That makes it much more pleasant to do, and then somehow it interacts, I don't know, but interacts with your motor system. I don't know.
Right. No, I have no idea.
No. There's this video of a patient who has a very severe type of aphasia, so this language disorder due to a stroke. And he's having a conversation, and so the person asks him a question like, "Oh, so whatever are your children?" And then he's saying, "Tono, tono, 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 tono," because that's the only word he can say. But there's like prosodies intact. He's really having a whole conversation only saying tono, 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 tono. And then the person asks him like, "How many children do you have?" And then he shows 4. And then she says, "Can you count that up for me?" And he's like, "Tono, tono, tono, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, tono, 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 tono. And every time I show that video to students, everyone is like, what is that? And it's really this thing, like, 1 to 10, we've done that so many times. We know that so well.
Yeah.
You're probably not having to do that from, it's just a learned thing really that you can produce. But once you get to the 12, there's a bit harder maybe. Like it's not as overlearned. He gets stuck and goes back to his kind of stereotypical production.
Right.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
But then thinking about what you just said, just from a language processing perspective, if we break it down into just language production, it has nothing to do with his motor skills of being able to produce those sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he can move his mouth. He can produce all of the sounds. Yeah.
So there are no, let's say with a speaking apparatus, there are no impairments there.
Right.
But so then it's, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm just trying to reverse engineer this now. So then it would be, well, I mean, he also understands what he's being asked.
Right, most of the time, yeah.
Okay, so it's also not a comprehension problem.
No, in many cases it's not really. So they do comprehend. For some more complex types of constructions, they show some deficits, but otherwise it's really comprehension is pretty much intact. It's really producing words, really. It's about. So it's not the motor parts of it, but really getting something, going from a concept to a particular label, being able to have the sounds of how you should sound that. That's where it goes wrong.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, hold on. That means, though, he does know the words themselves. I mean, if he's able to understand you, also saying how many children do you have, he has access to, let's just call it the lexicon of the language. You call lexicon, no, the corpus.
Lexicon.
Yeah, lexicon is also fine. Okay. So if I make a
no worries,
vocabulary mistake, please correct me. So he has access to that, but now it's literally just the linking of the word he knows in the lexicon to the motor. No.
Well, so it can be at various levels. Or not various, not many, but there's one first step. Let's say you go from a concept to a particular abstract word. It's not yet the word as we would produce it in terms of how it sounds. So it's a more abstract thing that's very far removed from a motor program. So that's the first step. You have to go from a concept to that particular abstract representation. That's at least what theories assume. And it can be already at that point that it goes wrong, right? That the concept is intact, but you can't get to a particular label for it. And then there's a second step, which is going from this label to putting it into what we call the word form or a phonological representation, something that has sound to it. So it's not yet motor commands, but it has information about what the sounds are in that word.
Yeah.
That's another step where we know it can go wrong, that they do have an abstract word, but they can't exactly have this, they don't have access to the sounds of that word. If you ask these people, is it cup? So they can't find, I don't know, microphone. They can't find the word for microphone at that point. Sometimes if you give them the option, you say, is it table that you're trying to say? They will say no. Is it, cup? No. Is it microphone? Yes. Right? So they do know, they do have the knowledge about that word, but once they have to produce that themselves, they for some reason cannot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it can be then the process from the concept to the label, or label to the word form. Yeah. Or word form to the actual physical production of that sound, which they don't have problems with.
Right, yeah, exactly. Then it's usually, you usually see it, I think, in other cases. but then it's really more of a motor thing, right? So you really notice in the way that it's being produced that it's either inconsistently produced over multiple utterances. So if you would say microphone throughout the day a couple of times, every time the hour would be somewhere else in the articulators. Or it's a general problem with particular articulators. So you find, that all of sounds that require a certain strength of that particular muscle, that they are all showing that type of deficit. Mm-hmm. But these are more of the motor types of deficits. They're not exactly seen as more of these, let's say, more truly language. I don't like that term so much. But, if you would see producing words from a more motor perspective or a more psycholinguistics or more, retrieving things from memory, then some of the deficits will really be way more on the motor side of things. And these people who cannot easily find words, it's usually not at the motor level, but really more at the deeper level, going from representations in memory or going from a concept to a label to a sound.
And when it comes to the concepts that you now talked about, is the source for knowing these concepts for language comprehension the same as for language production?
Yeah, I think that's something that is not debated. The concepts themselves, they are regardless of you're using them to produce yourself or if you're hearing a word and going to the meaning of that word. Yeah.
I mean, if we look at the brain as being hopefully as efficient as it can be, why store something twice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Right? And otherwise, also patients suffering from brain damage should then also show similar, not similar, but very particular differentiation with their performance, if that was the case.
Right.
Yeah.
And you do see when in cases of what's called semantic dementia, right? That
what is that?
So it is a type of dementia, but it particularly affects like conceptual knowledge. So people will, over time, they will lose information about concepts. And that holds if they now produce or comprehend words, or even if you give them, objects that they don't need any word, they don't need to use any language for, they will still show deficits in understanding what an animal is, for example. So everything at some point becomes a cat or an animal. If in their drawings, you can see that they are losing knowledge about the concepts themselves rather than just the labels.
And does it? Oh, that's interesting. And does that semantic dementia move upward hierarchy? So, for example, what I mean is, so you have a cat, and then you have mammal, animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean. It becomes more prototypical. I'm not sure because I think a mammal is still and even a less used level of in the hierarchy that we don't talk about so often mammals as such, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think if you start generalizing, I'm not so familiar with the behavior of these patients, but I think when there's generalization, there's either it goes towards prototypicality, so everything becomes a dog because it's more prototypical, or everything becomes an animal because it's a higher level label. But I don't think you wouldn't move up and say this is an eukaryote or something, right? I don't think that.
And prototypical is also then, I guess, patient specific. I'm sure there are some general prototypical aspects, but if you're, for example, a patient that's a scientist,
right?
Is that possible?
I don't know. I do think that familiarity with certain things would shape what remains intact, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that's the case. I'm just not very familiar with reports about that. I had to remember of this case. It was an aphasia, so someone with a language disorder due to a stroke. He was an accountant before the stroke. And I was observing his behavior, and he was reading aloud text. This happened over multiple occasions. Almost every time he read aloud a number, even though it was just, he's reading text that says, in that house there are 3 people. When he would read the 3, he would say $3 million. He would always add $1 million or $1,000. He would always add $1,000 to it. So he would say like, in that house, there are $3,000 people. And I thought that was just so amazing because, for him, numbers, probably from his profession, numbers do come together quite a lot with $1,000 attached to it, right? So for him, that's a way more familiar, way more frequent type of utterance than it is for me.
Yeah.
So I do think that you probably find these biases in their behavior as well, that, familiarity does, or the frequency of certain things are also person dependent. That you would find that being reflected in their behavior for sure.
Well, that's crazy. Well, it would be nice to have $300,000.
Exactly, right? If you're always talking in the thousands, you're doing very well.
Exactly. You're doing very well. You definitely have the right clientele. Let's say that. But you mentioned stroke. One thing I don't know why I never asked you this, but in my family also some people suffer from stroke, and I've learned very early on that one of the earliest signs that something stroke-related is happening is language impairment. That's one of the very first things that happens. How come? What's happened? How is that? Is that related to where the stroke's happening?
Yeah, I think it's even right, because the majority of the people are left hemisphere dominant for language, right? So if you're having a left hemisphere stroke, then there are, I think, 3 signs, right? Which is the dropping of the mouth. Weakness or paralysis of the side of the body, and speech.
Yeah.
Something with your speech. These are signs that will, in particular, the speech sign will be there in case the stroke is in the left hemisphere. Or in the hemisphere there's dominant for language in people, which in most cases is the left one. So I remember even seeing, I think it wasn't that long ago even, reading in a paper that actually right hemisphere strokes, they are less often noticed, diagnosed at that particular critical, more acute point, because the speech isn't impaired, right? So you would have, you would have the motor thing, but because, the 3 main signs, one of them includes speech, I think it ends up being detected in some cases because of it not being a strong, it's not present there when it's a right hemisphere stroke in many cases.
Yeah.
So people actually end up not paying that much attention to it, possibly also being a stroke.
Okay. Oh, wow. I did not know that. I thought it was universal. I mean, it's good to know that it's not. Right. Because if it's already 2 from the 3, that's enough.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a specific reason that people get left hemispheric language dominant or right? Does it have to do with handedness?
No, I think there's a lot of research on that, and no, we have not been able to show that that's the case. So I think from at least some very old, I can't say that, but some older studies, they're already from early on, it was clear that even, I think the numbers at that point were, 95% of the right-handers are left hemisphere dominant, but still 82% or 79% of the left-handed people were also left hemisphere dominant. So that dominance thing goes beyond just handedness. But I think there's a lot of debate in the literature why that's the case.
Could there be like a genetic marker maybe?
I think that, so there's someone on campus even at the MPI looking at that. And I don't know what the latest research is saying about it. But I think it's not that clear, that there's, for some reason, you ended up being dominant on one side for one thing and therefore language goes to the other hemisphere. It's really not the case. Okay. So, so I don't know exactly how it works, but it's usually the answer is it's more complicated than we thought.
Yeah, but that's good, isn't it? I mean, I just remember it's when you have a result, you do a study and the result is as you expected.
It's boring, right?
Boring.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really like when something gets out that you didn't expect at all, then it's really, Oh, that's
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, it
it's
gets you
I was
thinking.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, many people would hate that. They want your data to conform to your theories. But I tell this to students a lot when they come to me like, no, it's not working out. We're not finding what we thought. Oh, and they're really upset about it. And I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. And they're like, what? How can you say this? Like, now I don't know what you're writing my discussion. It's like, no, but that's the exciting thing. You know?
But that's what the discussion is for.
Yeah,
isn't
exactly.
It? It's not the we thought this and that's what happened.
Exactly.
You have
Boring,
a great day.
yeah.
No. It's we thought this. That's not what happened. What could this be?
Yeah, exactly.
This is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is. But then I was blindsided by all the language studies I took part in because they always excluded people that were left-handed.
Left-handed, yeah.
But then it makes no sense.
Well, it does in a way because, you run a slightly bigger risk of including people who are right hemisphere dominant for a language if you have left-handed people. It's just...
Okay.
Just
Well, it makes... Okay. Yeah, it's just not black and white.
No,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you may be excluding tons of people who still have left hemisphere dominance because you're excluding the left-handed people.
Right.
But, they are not that many anyways. And so in that sense, it's okay. Yeah.
Coming back to a point you said earlier, so I have to apologize to you in advance. I might be jumping back and forth.
Oh, no, I love that. Don't worry.
It might get annoying for the listeners, so I apologize also. I hope they already know that I keep doing this. You mentioned language and memory. Mm-hmm. And I remember while I was doing my PhD here, we had this, what was this called? These Friday PhD meetings a long time ago. And I remember you were presenting.
All right.
And
at that time already, yeah.
it just pops into my mind. Okay, this is actually not written down anywhere here. And you were looking at language and you were including memory, you were including motor, you were including all of these other attention, research, all of those things. And I mean, I was just focused on motor. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, how else could you look at language? Shouldn't you include all of those things? But there was also a lot of people there that really did not like what you were saying because they don't look at language from all of those perspectives. Why? Am I missing something? Am I being too motor focused or too naive? Maybe there's something. Right. I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt.
I don't know. So I've always had that impression as well that, or let me put it that way. I think from a more, maybe even due to tradition, over time, people came to study things. My domain is motor control, so I study motor control.
Right.
My domain is, memory, long-term memory, so I study mostly episodic memory. Or I do cognitive control, and then the other people do language. But if you think about it, to me, as a domain, it's a huge domain that is way bigger than each one of these other domains.
Yeah.
And I don't know a single person who studies language as a thing. Like you always end up focusing either on production or on comprehension. And even within that, you focus on one particular aspect of it because otherwise it's just too big. Like no one does, and the motor control of speaking and retrieving things from memory. No one does both because it's just completely different. So I think from a more, maybe because how things evolved over time within the cognitive sciences, you either have people who study language or something else. And what I've always tried to do is bridge. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed when trying to bridge the gaps is different things, actually. So some people would say, the people from these other domains, they look at me and say, you're doing language. Why are you even trying to talk to us? Whatever you're doing is language. Or if you find something that could be interesting to us, we'll say, but of course you're finding that because your task is an episodic memory task. Well, it's not. It's a language task. Yeah, no, but there's episodic memory in there. That's why you're finding something that looks like our thing. when I would talk to language people about how I was trying to bridge it, I would also get, these, why do you need that? Language is a unique thing, or, it's unique to humans. It's its own thing. It doesn't need all of these other domains to be involved. Language is unique, and there's core language, and we don't need to study these other domains. And then surprisingly, there are these other people like you, and I was talking to my colleague this morning, actually, with Sabine, and the reaction is like, isn't that trivial that you should be studying these things more, like linking them to each other? Isn't that obvious? And isn't everyone looking at the problem in that way? And now you're asking the same thing. And like, I don't know if I've been missing entirely who is doing that, because I've not encountered these people.
Right.
And over the years, I felt that I'm most of the time doing this quite on my own.
Yeah.
In many of the cases. So I don't know. I agree with you that that's how we should be looking at it. Maybe not uniquely, like just doing that, but we should also be doing that. And maybe I should go back to the literature and see if I'm missing something, because to you it also appears to be trivial.
Well, no, I guess I really have no answer to this. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt, because there's always a chance that you miss something, always. So be open for that. But when I ask probing questions, I just never get a satisfying answer. It's just always like, oh yeah, that's that. Yeah, so how was that an argument against what I just said? It's like, why don't we, I don't know, look at language and motor control? Oh, because the sky is blue. What? That's how it feels to me. So I'm like,
right.
What did you just? That makes no sense.
But now, so I'll ask you something, Mr. Motor Controller researcher. Do you know that actually?
It's been some time, to be fair. Okay.
No, but even that time, that's one of the most fundamental things that I think motor control people may not know.
Okay.
That speaking is actually in terms of the amount of muscles you're using, in terms of how fast you have to use them, how well coordinated you have to use them. Speaking is the most, the most complex and the most, the ultimate motor control problem.
I can imagine.
It's the fastest discrete thing that has to happen in a perfectly coordinated way.
I can imagine.
It's speaking.
It's... I believe you immediately, because
but
it just
you guys
makes
don't
sense.
talk about that. Like,
No,
I don't think
don't.
the motor control
we don't.
domain people they realize that they are also neglecting a huge part. And then there are these people who only do speech motor control, which is yet another thing.
And
that needs a specialization. But
I agree with you. It's not something I looked into, but it makes complete sense from a motor control perspective, from the amount of muscles you need to use in a coordinated way, the distribution of those muscles, the timing of the sounds you produce, and not only the timing of the sounds you produce, but accessing what we just talked about, the concept, from concept to label to word form, and then production of sound. There is so little time to do all of that. It's insane.
It's amazing that we can actually do it, right? And that's why I find production just so
And that's
so
just
cool.
from a motor control perspective. It's insane that we can do that.
Right.
But if you just look at it from a motor control perspective, we don't give it that much credit, I guess. Maybe it's just, so now I'm just saying things, right? There's no science backing this up. Maybe because everyone can do it. You know what I mean? I mean, if we look at sports,
right,
from a motor control perspective, of course, those things are amazing, but they pale in comparison to the details we just talked about, what's required for language. But yet, if you can hit a baseball with a bat, you can earn millions.
right.
But if you can just speak normally, you're normal. It's fine.
Right.
However, do you remember this? What's his name of this guy? I forgot his name. This fastest talking man on the world.
Yeah, no, but I can imagine. I don't know who the person is.
And this received a lot of praise because it literally is even more insane. It's yeah. So whoever is listening, just type that into YouTube, fastest speaking man. I think there's this video where he's doing Michael Jackson's Bad, and he's just speaking it, the whole song, and I think he does it in 15 seconds or something. And you can hear every word. That's the crazy
wow.
part. You can hear every word, but I have no idea how he can do this. So it's lots of practice from a motor control perspective. A lot of practice.
Right.
But still.
And probably not retrieving anything from memory really, or at least not like the words themselves probably lose meaning for him.
Yeah. It must be a complete forward model that just gets played, run down. But still, no, I agree with you. We are just as guilty. It's, but I just never got it. I just didn't understand how you could not study that together. And actually, so I'm sorry that I'm still talking, but there was, hold on, I wrote this down actually. You know, in the, we developed language, humans, around what time? Do you know?
You mean it from birth until later, or when it came in evolution?
In evolution.
I never know these things.
So, okay. So I looked it up.
Okay. Because I was going to say, like, I think it's again debated, right? And we are pushing this further to a bit earlier times than we thought at first.
Yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's I mean, we can't know for sure because nobody had a recorder.
Right.
So what can you rely on? Some paintings, nobody really knows about word production, I guess, but
I guess not.
Must be writing then, something like that. But what I found interesting was, I think a few years ago, a researcher, Aldo Faisal, he's working at Imperial College London. And he's normally studying motor control and those types of parts. And what he was looking into the development of stone tools in the Paleolithic period, which is 2.6 million years ago. So I was thinking, what has that to do with anything? What are you talking about? And he was showing these images of these stone tools that were very primitive. And then he showed other periods of the Paleolithic period. It's more recent, which showed quite a big development in the complexity of the stone tool. So even if you just look at the stone itself, of how the pieces are being chipped, how the stone is being designed. Mm-hmm. Now, what does this have to do with movement? What they did is they taught people, like nowadays, normal humans, how to make these stone tools. So you have a stone, and then you just have another stone, and then you chip it away, and you have to learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. And while these people were doing these movements, he was recording those movement patterns, and he was using some fancy machine learning algorithms to dissect specific patterns of movement. Mm-hmm. He was looking at it from a perspective of a grammar. Is there maybe a movement grammar, an action grammar involved in this? And when he looked at the early ones, the grammar was very primitive. Mm-hmm. And when he looked at the more complicated ones, the grammar was much more elaborate. Mm-hmm. And what I just thought that was very fascinating. And it coincides with our increase in brain size as humans. Mm-hmm. And it also coincides with roughly the period where people say that's when we developed language. Do you think that, I mean, just maybe I'm going too far putting these two things in the same bucket because one is motor and one is something else. Do you think, just to go one abstraction level higher, it has to do with our ability to abstract things, like in a grammar sense, that gave us the ability to actually develop language in the first place?
Because what you think you're doing with such a movement grammar is being able to abstract away from a certain thing.
Yeah. So it's not like they couldn't produce those movements before. The muscles were there,
right?
But I guess the abstraction level from the conceptual perspective,
right?
And then the coinciding with a increase in brain size.
But it could be something that gave rise to both, right? That
of course.
Yeah,
of course.
I think, like, once you start understanding that a certain shape leads to a certain type of cutting that has those consequences, then you're going to move more towards making the tool look that way rather than in another way.
Of course.
And maybe it's the ability to maybe plan and understand the consequences of a certain shape giving lead to this that will later give rise to that. That's the thing that enabled both the tools to become more complex and language to become what it is. I would say rather that, well, which it is boiling down to maybe the ability to create abstractions
maybe
from certain things. But I don't think it's the motor skills that enabled us to do that.
No. I'm not talking about I'm not saying everything's motor. No worries. I'm not like that anymore. I remember I used to. But no, just from an abstraction perspective. It's just I just thought this was I just never thought really cool. I just never thought of movement as a grammar.
Right.
And already just looking at it from that perspective, like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Definitely, yeah.
And I mean, it's not like he was not, and it started to get more complex. It wasn't just this one movement that resulted in some type of muscle combination as a grammar, but a specific type of movement combinations that then, the abstraction became more and more. And just as we have with language and the concepts we have, I was just, I was blown away.
Yeah.
That was
really cool.
insane. Yeah. But unfortunately, I have not seen that being published anywhere yet. But maybe I just don't have access. I don't, you know how that goes with a paywall.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but okay, sorry. I just went on this rant. This was quite a strange tangent. Coming back to memory then, how do you look at language and how it interacts with memory? Because you are interested in that.
Right. Yeah, and I think also it depends a lot on when people talk about memory, what they are talking about. Because I think there's lots to be said about why, or, there used to be lots of good evidence that memory and language are really two separate things.
But how? I mean, you have
for sure episodic memory, right?
Okay.
So that's one thing. But then there's also, this, I think, evidence coming from HM, this patient who had both of his hippocampi resected, who developed severe memory problems. I think more of the evidence at that time was that his semantic memory was completely fine, which would be things like, what is the capital of France? And, what is X? That type of knowledge. That was not affected, even though this person could not form new memories whatsoever. So that was, I think, the evidence, the ultimate evidence that semantic memory and episodic memory are very separate from each other. And then language was always, I like to see lots of aspects of language as being part of semantic memory. But many people don't make it that explicit or don't really see it that way. They see language maybe, or our lexicon, as a special part of our memory system.
Well, still memory. I would argue that it's still memory.
Yeah, so would I, but yeah.
What the fuck, people? I mean, seriously. No, sorry. But I had this as well. I was studying, motor control, and I was looking into motor learnings, also memory, and be like, oh, those are implicit memories. What the fuck? Yes, memory. That's the word you should focus on here. Exactly. And I go, that's different than episodic memory.
Yeah, I think people just like chopping things into smaller pieces. Maybe we feel that it makes it more graspable in terms of our understanding, but I'm not sure.
Well, there must be a limit.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to to take a dump on those people. I understand that you need to put things into categories and study them, but there is a point where you need to put them back together.
Right, exactly.
Because,
and that's, and we are not very good at doing that. No, you're very right. I was just, so there's this thing, right? That episodic memory and semantic memory are two distinct things because, patients with hippocampal damage will have episodic memory, profound episodic memory deficits, but no semantic memory deficits. And now there's been quite a shift, I think, in the field. Even last year at a very big cognitive sciences conference, there was an entire symposium on semantic versus episodic memory as no longer being this versus thing, like it's way more intertwined. Or so there's lots of good evidence for that. But then what really I thought was striking is that at some point, what then happened is that people were saying, there's episodic memory that is not that different from semantic memory. But then they started again compartmentalizing semantic memory itself. So we have personal semantic memory and we have personal whatever type of memory. And then we have whatever semantic, and then all of a sudden semantic memory was no longer similar to episodic memory because we had created 5 different categories within semantic memory. And I was like, God. Oh God, this is just not helping it,
But is there evidence for it?
Well, they had good evidence that these are not exactly the same thing. But I find also in lots of the cases, it's more of, I find at least, it's such an artificial thing caused by the way we put people into experiments.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And so we create all of these, different categories within domains that may not really exist in that particular way. It's just that that's how we usually test people in experiments. And that's just a very bad way of going about it, I think.
I guess that's kind of funny. It's the studying language or actually anything is limited by the linguistic concepts we have in our own head.
Right.
Right? It's kind of a catch-22.
Exactly. Yeah. But so what I find really cool to try to do is see how, for example, the way that semantic memory is organized, if that affects, or not necessarily affects, but if that is reflected in the way we use language, for example. Right? So there's, again, this very nice things that I find really, really cool, again, coming from patients with brain damage. So you find these semantic paraphasias, right? So the person is trying to say wife, but he can't find the word. So he says my mother, no. My sister, no. And then the therapist asks him, oh, do you mean your wife? Yes, my wife, right? So he's in the right domain within, his women that are close to him in part of his family or whatever, but he can't get to that exact label. And so those are the things that I find really cool, how that to me is how the way that semantic memory is organized is reflected in how, in language as we are using it, in errors, for example. So those are the things that I like studying. And, how you can't just let's say, once you have a concept and you want to get to a label, the accepted idea in the field is that lots of things will also get activated. And sometimes you do grab the wrong label. So activation can't just spread without any breaks or, whatever, because it becomes a mess. So there needs to be something either controlling it or, selecting whatever you want, if you want a more homuncular explanation, which is not really an explanation.
What do you mean with activation in this case?
Yeah, that's, the way that cognitive scientists call activation, that we have no clue what it means.
What is that? Do you mean like brain activation?
No. Even at the level of a concept that if you want to,
Or maybe should I think about it like a, what are those things called? These word...
I think
bubbles. No, not word bubbles.
But I think I see what you. I also can't find that particular word.
Or you can also find them, I think, on Thesaurus, where you just type in the word and you can just click on synonyms,
Right.
and then you can get like a graphical representation of how far these things are away from each other. Or you mean like that type of activation?
No, but do you mean a word cloud?
Word cloud. Oh.
Right. No, not
this was
bubble cloud.
embarrassing.
No, not really. See, but that again shows, like how, the way things are organized in memory. No, more like, I don't know, if you think of, memories in terms of features, I think like feature-based explanations are nowadays quite more or less, I guess, accepted. So a concept will have multiple features, and probably if you're trying to use that concept or if you encounter that concept, activation here would maybe mean that neurons that are associated with those features are firing in synchrony, for example, right?
Okay.
But I think the way that cognitive scientists use activation is not really thinking about it in terms of neurons. A lot of the times I think it's more inspired by computational models where activation would be, I don't know, the level of that particular node in the network is more active.
Yeah.
But it's more the things spread and they can't just spread forever. And in any way that the network would allow for it, because I think if you do that, you get a mess and you don't get to anything in the end, right?
Right. I mean, then it would the whole thing would get activated. Doesn't matter where you start.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't add
solve
anything.
Any problem,
it doesn't solve
exactly.
any problem. It's like, okay, now you have a thing that just always, it's like a switch that it's just always on.
Everything, or
it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, the light's always on. So like, okay. No, I agree with you. Yeah, those models don't help.
No, exactly. So it's more in those terms of thinking of activation in those terms.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think we exactly know what it means in terms of what the brain is doing. I think there are attempts to, like what is a word?
Yeah.
Like I don't know of any good evidence of what a word is in terms of, neurons and what they do. I don't know what a word is in the brain. Right?
Wow,
exactly.
I got me.
Like you didn't have that question on your list.
No, I didn't have that list. No, I was just thinking, how would I look into this? And then I thought, okay, I would look at this from a reading perspective, but then we are in perception research, and then we move into the visual cortex. But that's not a word. That's you're still at the processing of the visual features,
right?
And you need to reach some level of abstraction to then get to the word, but. Yeah, I have no idea. And then,
what would be a plausible thing for a word to be? Would it be lots of neurons firing together, and it's just the sum of the parts? That's what makes a word, but no individual neuron has the information about a word, even though you have these concept cells, right? They're supposed to have information. One cell representing one concept, regardless of the way you input your input is. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I wouldn't think so.
No, exactly. I don't buy that so much.
I don't buy it because there's too much cell death happening in the head,
exactly.
And language is still too prevalent. So it can't just be one neuron equating to one word. There must be some type of network activity, or I was also never really a big fan of it's not one neuron that has the word, but it's 7. It's like I was also never really a big fan of that either, because it's like it's what the but it needs to be distributed, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Right.
But how exactly it would be represented, I have no idea, because the level of abstraction is insane. Mm-hmm. If you really think it through, it's insane. And even if you don't get to language and just study vision, the level of abstraction there is already insane. Mm-hmm. And vision and language is one higher, I would say. Yep. Same goes for, if we were to stick to just perception, same goes for hearing words, auditory perception, then it's the same. And if you were to think of, it's called Braille, and then for touch, it's the same. It's always one up.
Right. Yeah.
But I have no idea how that would be represented in the brain. I guess not by just one area. No. Because it's, as you said, it's everything. But what would that be? I don't know.
Yeah. So those are the things that I find really cool to think about, but not that I really haven't. And it's just so hard. I think a lot of we can advance a lot by looking at single cell recordings in animals.
Yeah.
But then for language, that doesn't really work, right? And so
I never thought about that. You're right.
Yeah. So there's a huge gap to fill that we won't be easily able to fill for language because it is restricted to humans. There's no other way you can study it.
But how? Wait. So okay, I heard very often actually during my entire studies, language is specific for humans. It makes us. It's one of the things that makes us so special.
It's the thing that makes us human.
It's okay. Let's say it's the thing that makes us so human. But there are also some cases where, for example, animals learn sign language or parts of sign language. Is that just faking language?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess if you would put it that way, I think that one of the main things with that is that we are able to generate new sentences, new everything by just putting words we already know, using rules we already know, but we are always able to combine them and produce new stuff. And I think a lot of what these animals cannot do is, for example, that kind of thing. So they probably learn the meaning of certain combinations and they reuse that, but there's no generation of new patterns by applying those rules, for example. So again, it's not exactly a literature I'm very, very familiar with, but I think that's what makes the entire difference is knowing particular symbols and what they mean versus being able to generate new structures by combining things in a particular way.
Yeah. There was this one case that I was just thinking of now. It's have you heard of this gorilla who has been taught sign language, who has been trained with a cat? No? Okay. So just bear with me, all right? So there was this gorilla and it was in captivity, and they tried to teach the gorilla sign language. And the vocabulary was all right, but not for a gorilla, of course, outstanding, but not what the learning didn't go as fast as I think the researchers were hoping for. And then at some point, the researchers introduced a kitten into the setting, and they saw that the gorilla was, super excited about the kitten. Then, it played well with the kitten, right? It understood this is a fragile animal. So when the researchers saw this, they started to use the kitten as a learning tool, as a reward for if the gorilla was doing a good job, then it could learn with, then it could play with the kitten. Right. And then the vocabulary of this gorilla went through the roof. Right. Yeah. And then one day, unfortunately, the kitten died.
Oh no!
It got out and got hit by a car, and it died. And the gorilla was super excited. So there's this video you can watch on YouTube. It's So you can watch it. I'm not making this up. And then the gorilla wanted to see the kitten, and the researchers had to tell the gorilla that the kitten died. And when they did, you could see immediately that the gorilla understood what happened and went into mourning. And I was just like, okay, this is insane. So for me, it's then just very difficult to differentiate. Is this now language? What is this? I have no idea.
Yeah, then I guess it depends on your definition of language, right? Because
what is the definition of language? Because
I don't know.
I always hear also, I always hear these things where communication is equated with language. Is it? Is it the same? I really have no idea.
No, I guess not, right? Because you have things that do convey a message by just being a symbol. that we know either because we learned what it means, or some things are just so intuitive from the way they look that we know that they mean something. So they convey information, they communicate something, even though it's not via language.
Right.
So I guess, I don't know, like, even though I study language, I never really bothered of thinking so much about what a good definition of language is or what other people think about it.
I find it very difficult.
Yeah, it's like the word thing, right? How do you define a word? There's a problem with almost every definition you can give. So these are things we know so well what they are, and yet we don't.
I mean, everybody, I guess it's like, as you said, at the beginning, when learning all these languages, at the core, you understand the principles. And I think we all understand these language principles, but we don't really know. It feels one removed,
right?
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's a strange feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be just me, right? So there's likely that there are very good definitions of language out there that would allow you to say, why the gorilla case is not language. But I guess the gorilla at least understood the message being conveyed.
Yeah.
So maybe the gorilla does understand all of the concepts, especially if you chunk them together. There's an higher order of the message than just the, each unique concept, but more once you put them together, they also mean something at the level of the combination.
Right.
But then if the gorilla can't produce that himself, then maybe still lacking one aspect of it, right? That would make language be complete.
I think that would be then interesting to look at that, exactly this part again from the anthropological perspective that we talked about the ability to abstract. Mm-hmm. And maybe then it makes more sense.
Right.
I don't know if that's... maybe that's part of language definition. I should have looked this up.
Yeah, me too. What are definitions of language? No, but this thing that you said about the reward, I do find that really interesting. If you look at most animal research, how it's done with reward, right? So in even like very cruel situations that you remove all of the food and the animal only gets food once they do something.
Yeah.
And that's not how we test human participants in the lab.
Oh.
Right? I don't think ethics would really like that.
No, we just yell.
But if you... Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would have wanted to sometimes. Right. I would have wanted to sometimes. I never did. I would have wanted to sometimes. But sorry, continue.
No, but if you do look at what reward does to animals, right? Then it's just huge, and it makes the whole difference sometimes. So I also wonder a lot from the animal literature. Yeah, how much the fact that it's really on the basis of punishment and reward, how much that shapes the behavior in a way that we are kind of not paying enough attention to. Mm. And that's why we don't find some parallels with humans simply because we don't put them in this punishment and reward type of situation.
Right.
But a lot of...
like we are confounding the research by just introducing these maybe overly focused tools of reward and punishment to make the experiment setting.
But more like if it makes... how much can you generalize from the animal behavior if it's so shaped by reward and punishment? How much is it then really true about in general? So, for example, in terms of the brain, right?
Yeah.
If we find certain things, that's how it works. And by using animal research, we try to explain how the brain works. But all of it is always in the context of reward after you starve an animal, almost.
Yeah.
Then I do think it has quite an impact on what you will find. And so how much does it really tell us about how it maybe is in humans in general? That's the thing I'm not entirely sure about. But
it's a valid question.
It's more, it's always been my issue with neglecting the fact that they are put in those situations in the first place.
Yeah.
That we don't do with humans. how much it really tells us something about, how much can we really translate to human behavior or the brain for that matter. But that's an aside. Yeah. But no, the reason why I wanted to say this is because I think then also in terms of doing experimental research on language, most of the time we are using language to communicate something that has a purpose, right? There's a reason why we're trying to communicate that. And I think maybe we don't realize enough that the fact that we do get that communicated is also rewarding for us, right? And then you never have that in a lab situation where there's absolutely no reason why people are speaking. There's no message really to be conveyed.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I know how frustrating it can be when somebody doesn't understand what you're trying to say.
Right.
It doesn't feel rewarding at all.
No, exactly, right? So that's something that I've always thought a bit about, like in terms of, realizing that there's way more reward going on in real communication by simply, by just being in the communication and accomplishing that the person you were talking to does whatever you want her to do or, understands or whatever. There's a lot of reward involved there.
I mean, it is goal directed, right? And if you frame it that way,
yep.
And then achieving that goal is the reward in itself. Just remember from a motor control framing things that way from a reinforcement learning perspective, it made sense. Why would it be different for language? You're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, exactly, right? Why would the brain come up with 50 million different concepts if one overarching one works?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. But okay, coming back to language making us so special, would we also develop language if we wouldn't grow up with one? Is there any research in that? I mean, I don't know how you would study this unless you're just insanely cruel.
You mean whether people would spontaneously... So I think there are a couple of cases of deaf communities that invented their own sign language that emerged spontaneously simply because of the need humans have to communicate and socialize.
Whoa.
So that there have been a couple of those cases. Yeah, an entire deaf community just, it arose from their interactions. A sign language arose from that. So yeah, I do think there's something
that's crazy.
Like it's intrinsic to us to communicate in a certain way that then gives rise to language. So I do think it would always happen.
But now that you put the community part into it, do you think then it's related to us being quite a social animal? Or do you think this would also happen with someone who is completely isolated for, I don't know.
So like you would take some person who's raised by a pack of wolves.
Yeah, let's say that. That's actually
completely not hypothetical.
Well, that's actually a better example than what I had. It's a more humane example than what I had in mind.
So the person has actually never
interacted with other humans.
And never even known that there's language.
Never known there's language. I mean, whatever that human might want to communicate to the wolves, they wouldn't understand. What that...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think real cases of that exist.
No,
I would hope.
No idea. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing with this question. You would hope this will not happen.
Isn't there a story of a child raised by wolves? Or is that just a myth?
I have no idea. In all honesty, I don't know. But just, I mean, the social aspect of this is so strong.
Yeah, but then it could be that the communication would be there, right? The person just wouldn't... I don't know. It's actually a very good question. I think maybe because we have this ability to generate and combine symbols in a particular way, that we do, even like with the sign language communities or the deaf communities, right? They came up with that because of the need to communicate.
Yeah.
Then I guess maybe the child raised by the wolves would use their means. They would howl or whatever, but probably I don't know, I'm just making this up as well, but I would at least expect that it would do it in a more systematic, or maybe call it complex, or at least like being able to combine multiple things and assign different types of sounds to different types of needs, and then combine them in a way that the wolves wouldn't.
Right.
That would spontaneously emerge from this person, I would guess.
Yeah.
But I don't dare putting that to the test.
Well, whoever knows, this would be quite interesting to know. But I was just thinking, if you were to study this from a purely scientific, and you wouldn't care about any moral and ethical things, and were to just keep a human in complete isolation for their entire life and see what's going to happen, just because we are so social, social animals, that human would already be so, I think that human would just die.
Yeah.
Because it's missing one. Sure, it may have water and food and things, but we know what happens to humans when they are kept in isolation.
Yeah.
And they just,
Yeah. So I think I fully agree with you. So the rate, for example, but it's well known that people who either, due to aging start losing hearing, or the ones who do develop a language disorder or aphasia due to brain damage, they are way more likely to become isolated and more likely to develop a depression because of that isolation than people who do keep their language intact. So again, right, it's the thing, like just not being able to communicate as well, and has a huge impact on quality of life.
Does it have to be communicating with someone else, or would it be also fine if you were to just talk to yourself?
I guess not, right? Because when do we, I think we do talk to ourselves to be able to organize our thoughts, but most of the time I don't think that that's what we get the most out of in terms of satisfaction in our lives, right? It's really about sharing things with other people, ideas and thoughts. And so I don't think just a monologue would satisfy anyone.
No, that's true.
Unless you are, one of these people who really seek isolation on purpose. But I think these are more the special cases. Yeah,
that's true. And it only really works in doses. I mean, right? It's actually, I'm saying right. I don't actually know if that's true. I was just thinking for myself. If sometimes I do enjoy isolation, but then that is it's
exactly.
sought,
you need a chunk of it
out,
and then
rather than the other way around. It's no, that's crazy. This is something I was wondering about for a long time.
Whether we should test that?
We can't. Okay. At least I can't think of anything of how to morally do this morally and ethically in an okay way. I don't see a way of how that's possible. And if that's not possible, I don't think it's a question worth answering. Well, I guess if
you are a misanthrope and you do believe that human beings are horrible people, then for you it's morally and ethically the best thing to do is take a human being away from the contact with other humans. But I think you would be quite unique in thinking things that way.
Yeah, well, if
it would not be approved by almost anyone else.
I was about to, and if that is the way you think, you're already with the wolves already. No, that's true. But you're also confirming that thought by doing that in the first place. You confirm your own theory about human beings by being, I don't think that's okay at all. Yeah.
No.
But does that, what happens? So now we've mainly spoken about a single language, except for the beginning when we talked about how many languages you speak. What happens when we learn multiple languages? Because I've heard so much stuff about this, and it would just take such a load off my mind if you could call bullshit on so many of those things, which I don't know if it's bullshit or not. That's the thing. You just hear so much about it. Everyone has a perspective on language, of course.
Yeah.
I just don't know what of that stuff is bullshit and which isn't. For example, to give you an example.
Yeah, exactly. I need that because otherwise...
to give you an example. I grew up bilingual. I guess you as well.
Not really.
Not really. Okay. So I know other people that also grew up bilingual. And then I know people that, of course, did not grow up bilingual. And I have been told
that you are superior.
No. I have not been told that I'm superior. I have been told I'm inferior.
Oh?
Yes. It's and with more languages that you grow up, the more inferior you grow. That's what I have heard. That's what, well, not what I have heard. This is what I have been told.
Right.
Specifically by friends who now have children, and they are multilingual, very proficient in multiple languages, and they don't know how they should, interact with their child. Should they speak to their child in German, in English, in Dutch, in whatever? Mm-hmm. Or should they just stick to the country they are currently residing in? And they have been advised by teachers from kindergartens and things that they should just stick to one language. And if you do more, it's going to slow the child down.
Wow. Okay. So that's not exactly my field, but I think there's one crucial rule. You can speak even, 16 languages at home, as long as the input the child is getting is from a proficient speaker.
Okay.
If you're both not from that country, but you live in that particular country, and then you both start giving the language of that country as the input to the child because it will be more beneficial, but you're both not proficient in that language, that's a bad idea. The input needs to be, following all of the rules, because that's what will enable the child to learn something. And also, the learning machinery itself can only develop well if it's learning through consistent rules. So as far as I know, the bad cases have been when the input is not the right input. It's just, the person who doesn't speak the language well and is using that to communicate with the child. That's when it goes wrong. And as far as I know, there's absolutely no evidence that growing up with more than one language at home is going to affect you in any case. What could do is that they were slightly slower in the beginning, or if you measure in terms of vocabulary size, say a child of 5 should have a vocabulary size of X. If you're going with 2 languages, you will have a vocabulary size smaller than X in each one of those languages at that particular age. But hey, if you think about it, you actually have 2 vocabularies, right? So actually you have way more. It's just that for that particular language, you have fewer words than someone who's only growing up with one language. So as far as I know, there's absolutely no evidence that it's detrimental as long as the input is good. It has to be good language in the input. So if it's not your mother tongue, don't use it, I would say. But if it's your mother tongue, go for it. Even if it's 2 or 3 at home, I would go for it. To me, there's absolutely no evidence.
Okay.
And I can confirm this with my colleagues.
No, I believe you. I couldn't find any on this either, but nobody believes me.
Right.
I'm not a language
scientist. So now from a language scientist.
So that's good. Whew. So I'm not slowed down or anything.
No, exactly. I always thought you were a bitch,
right? I have issues. That's fair. But, okay, but that's good.
But then there's the other side of this, right? That the claim has been for a long time that bilinguals are actually way superior because they grow up learning or having to switch between languages all the time. So that would give them superior cognitive control abilities, which has also been largely
debunked.
Yeah, I wasn't going to use that term.
Why?
But
okay. Call bullshit on that.
There's quite some evidence showing that it's not really like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just remember when I was learning Dutch. So when I moved to the Netherlands and I was learning Dutch, and I had to switch within a span of 10 minutes between 4 languages. I was having massive headaches by the end of the day. Now it's fine, but at the beginning it felt unbearable.
Even though you grew up switching between 2 languages and you were fine.
Yes.
Yeah. So then it's just getting old. That's kind of the issue.
Well, I was 25. But I guess that's old for language. I don't know.
Well, for learning a new one, it is. So then it's going to be more effortful, right?
That's true. That's true. But I didn't feel like I was having trouble learning Dutch, but just this switching back and forth. Now, now it's fine. Now it goes with ease. I can even do it within a sentence, no problem. And people are just completely confused what's happening. But I remember at the beginning, this was really something I had to practice. It felt like an additional skill that had nothing to do with the language itself, but literally being able to, well, I guess if we stick to what we said at the beginning, to pick the right word form, I guess, or at which point, when we actually learn a new language, what is it that we learn? We don't learn new concepts.
No, I don't think we do. But the abstract labels themselves are already language specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Because it's not a label for the concept, right? Because you can have concepts that don't have a label.
True.
So it's really the word. If I say cup, it is cup, but it's not yet cup with the sounds of cup. It's kind of, it's a difficult thing to.
But I think I now understand
to
what
explain,
you mean.
but it's not a concept, but it's not yet cup with the sounds it has.
Yeah.
It's this abstract step between the concept and the way it should sound.
Yeah. Is there a limit to how many languages we can learn?
I think there was this question. No, the question I think was, are there languages that are not, they're unlearnable? I would say no, but...
I would say that too, but I don't know.
Yeah. I know there was this, he just finished his PhD not so long ago, and he was one of these polyglots that, I don't know, like 12, 13, 15 languages, something like that.
Holy shit.
So, yeah, so I don't think I think it's more, there's a limit. There's a time limit to how much time you have in your life to spend on learning languages. But I guess there's no limit. Practically there is, but theoretically I don't think there is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You have to, well, of course, one, you need to have the time to do it. And two...
the opportunities to practice it as well, right?
Because
if you don't choose it...
You have to speak it. And
yeah,
I already have problems with mine. I don't
yeah,
know
right.
how you
if you
do
don't
it.
choose it. So, like when you were talking about the switching, I remember at some point it was my birthday and I had people, I think, from multiple countries at home, but there were 6 of the languages I spoke were at that table. Mm-hmm. And I was able to just, during the entire meal, switch all the time between those 6 languages. I had no issues with it whatsoever. And now I can't do that anymore because I don't practice anymore all of those languages. I speak them just every now and then, and it got much worse. So,
yeah.
And even my mother tongue is just not as good anymore because I don't use it. So it is kind of not use it or lose it, but you lose some of the fluency, some of the abilities. You don't lose much of the language itself. But I think more this fast use it's
definitely.
more which...
No, I noticed that as well. My Farsi is terrible by now. I mean, it's not, I can still speak it, but if you put me on a marketplace now and it needs to go back and forth quick, I would look very bad. I wouldn't look like a proficient speaker at all.
Oh, okay, that bad.
Yeah. But it just happens. Yeah, you just got to keep at it. What do you think about all of these language learning tools, these apps that are popping up left and right? The most popular one, of course, Duolingo. At least that's to me. I
don't know how it works, actually. I remember following, I think it was Rosetta Stone at some point.
It works quite similar.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's for free. That's the only difference.
I remember what I hated about it is that they didn't tell you what the rules were and you were having to guess it yourself. But then for many people it may work. For me, it does not because, you give me the rule and I can go on and apply it because I understand what these rules should mean.
I see.
So for me, it never worked. And I think a lot of these tools are very much focused on, I don't know, like single words or things that come together, right? So you get whole sentences. I guess if you don't have any other option, at least you're getting something done. But
that's true. Yeah. I've been quite happy with. Sorry for interrupting you.
No.
I've been quite happy with Duolingo, I have to say. I'm not getting sponsored by these people, by the way. Just if somebody might be, no, I'm not. I've been using it to learn Spanish because it reminded me of Rosetta Stone, and you have this gamification aspect to it, which I sometimes find a little bit too much. But what I do like is surprisingly the thing that you dislike about it is I actually do like that they don't
tell you the rules, which works fine because these are all Indo-European languages, right? So like you already speak German, and in Spanish it's like one step away. It's not the exact same family of languages, but they do follow there's a very systematic saying between German and Spanish.
Yeah.
Now you go and apply this to Japanese or Farsi, right?
Yeah,
that is not, or Farsi is that Indo-European? No. I should.
I don't think so. At least it's not how it feels to me when I form sentences. It feels structure-wise very different.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it's probably not Indo-European, but I don't know. I may be making him. I don't know. Just don't go look it up yourself.
Yes.
Japanese, I know is a concrete, because I tried to learn Japanese using Rosetta Stone. And then it doesn't work, right? Because you know for sure that the rules are completely different, but you've got no clue, absolutely no clue how you're supposed to put words together in a sentence. So I'm not sure if people have tried to use these types of tools for learning something that is completely different typologically, if it works so well. I do think you need some explicit information about how sentences are to be formed because it's completely different. I do think that's the case.
I mean, there was specifically with the Spanish. So of course, I was the first thing I did is I was looking for a Spanish buddy to try out my newfound Spanish, and I have been laughed at left and right, really? Which is fine. I mean, I totally get it. I mean, when you say things like I own a suitcase, they think, why do you learn how to say that? But you have to start somewhere. But then I was making sentences where I thought I understood the structure, and then they corrected me. I'm like, wait, but it should be like this because in that scenario it's this. And then they explain the underlying rule, and then all of a sudden like, oh, okay, that would have been handy to know.
Right.
But yeah, so maybe it's too removed from that. You know, once in a while, it would actually be useful to know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so I don't think it should all be, you learn the rule and then you go and just repeat the rule, just drilling.
Me of, German school language learning.
Right, like that, yeah, just drill the rule. So maybe not that, but also sometimes it is good to know what the underlying rule is because then you get to the aha, and then you can go on and apply it. And if you just have to implicitly derive it yourself, in some cases, it could be that you're not as efficient in doing it.
Yeah.
So that would be my issue with these tools, that sometimes some more rules would help.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but what you did is very good. I think like put into practice what you learn quite as soon as you can. That's to me really the way to go.
Right. I did this with Dutch as well. I just got I wanted to do the Dutch training course here, but I had to pay for it. It was 1,500 euros.
Oh, God.
I didn't have that money. So I thought, well, the Germans had come here, learn that in 4 weeks. How hard can it be? Well, little did I know. So I just bought this little book. What was it called? Powerkurs Niederländisch für Deutsche. So that's what it was called.
Not for dummies, but for Deutsche.
Yeah, for Deutsche. It was, and I pushed through it in 4 weeks, and then of course you learned these basic rules, how to make plurals, what's the articles and things like this. And from that point on, I just tried to drill vocabulary into my head. And to all my Dutch friends, I said from now on,
Dutch,
no more English, which was very difficult for them because they are very accommodating. Mm-hmm. At least they try to be. And in this case, it just didn't help. But my language, my Dutch language then improved.
Yeah.
I would say exponentially, just because I had to use it. I had to put things into some type of a form.
Yeah, exactly.
It was terrible at the beginning, but after 4 weeks of suffering, I could definitely tell there was improvement. So I thought, hey, okay, I have to do the same with Spanish. Yeah, and Well, unfortunately, I
no
paused
time.
so far. I have to admit, it's the time that's the problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then it's easier if you already have those people around you, right?
Exactly.
But if you have to find a buddy that then will have to make time, it's going to be 1 hour a week, and it's already not really enough.
That's exactly. The 1 hour a week is, so I was doing the Duolingo every day. So that was good. And then I was trying to just call them once a week, but even that faded away. And that was
hard.
difficult. But it's I guess it's the way to go. And lots of people like learning new languages.
Yeah, exactly.
That's at least what I learned through Duolingo.
Yeah.
So Duolingo, if you're listening, maybe put some grammar rules in there.
Sometimes
at some point. Yeah. Maybe I just didn't get to that level yet. It's possible. I don't know. But if you didn't, just do that.
Yeah. Every now and then dropping like, this is the rule we are trying to teach you. That would help.
Yes. I just have a few more questions for you. Would you mind if we just hop back into the science part?
No, not at all.
So there has been this, I mean, I've been out of this for some time, but there has been this gene.
Oh, yeah.
They called it, back then at least, the language gene, FOXP2. What happened to the thing?
You know that the person who discovered it is also here on campus.
I know that. But I thought it's unfair. I thought it's unfair to ask Simon, or Dr. Fisher, I shall say. I have never met him in person, directly about this, because I'm sure he would be excited to talk about it. But the reason why I bring this up with you is because in this conversation, this presentation that you had back then, that you were specifically talking about FOXP2.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Because it's actually really cool. If you listen to Simon himself, he says also like, we never said this is a language gene. That makes absolutely no sense. It's just, I think, how the media picked it up and, I don't know, thought it was fancy enough to put it out there in that way.
Can you, because I know what it is, you know what it is. Can you just tell us a bit about the background of what this gene is? How has it been found?
I think it's a particular family, the KE family in England. And many people in the family showed, I think it was something, right, again, maybe not exactly how it is, but most of it will be right. What at that time was called specific language impairment, and nowadays it's called developmental language disorder. So a lot of the family members had that in combination with dysarthria.
What is that?
Dysarthria is when it's really more at the muscle level, is when there are problems with the coordination of muscles.
Okay.
And so you also get problems with speech, but really from the motor side, whereas the specific language impairment is really, it's more language and not, it's more the real core language thing. So these people will have, if you look at their production, there will be things, especially when things become more complex. Again, the way they form sentences is not always correct. If there are complexities in the not even complexities, but if you use, a relative clause like the man who did this walked out right now, that kind of construction is already more complicated for them to produce. So this family had many members that had this type of deficit. And I think they studied this family quite extensively because there was a whole, I think, lineage, how it's called, right? Mm-hmm. And they found that FOXP2 was affected in this family. So that's how it started. And I think by now there's much more that came, I think, out of those studies, but also other genes that have been linked to, so mutations in these genes linked to quite consistent findings in terms of development. And sometimes it affects language a bit more than just development in general. And then I think what they showed in mice, for example, is if you do something to FOXP2, I need to remember this because I even attended his course at that time. But it's something really at the level of learning I don't remember if it's exactly sequencing, that you can do that at the motor level as well with animals. But it's something very fundamental in learning itself that seems to be affected, that then has these far-reaching consequences for language as well. But it's not a language gene at all.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But that's
not how it should be interpreted.
All right. Because
I think FOXP2 is like genetics is really not my thing, but it controls lots of other mechanisms in terms of development in the brain as well, right? So it's a much deeper thing than being a language gene.
Yeah, because then, I mean, if it was a language gene and other animals that don't have language, that would be now my reasoning.
Like, why would they have a FOXP2? Why would they have
that gene? That would be now my reasoning.
Right.
But I might be too simplistic. Benefit of the doubt to the scientists.
To the media.
Because
I don't think scientists really thought there was a language gene. I don't think they thought that. I think it was really the way the media was talking about this. I really doubt any geneticist thought this was a language gene, because it's a very well-known gene that has it's a very important gene that does all kinds of things, regulates all kinds of things. So I don't think any of the geneticists thought this was a language gene.
Okay. Well, This is comforting. I've been bashing the media quite a lot lately anyways, but unfortunately they just confirm it. They keep on confirming it. But this is definitely good.
Yeah. Science is not that lost, right?
No, but that's good. You know, you always hear these things of scientists need to communicate their work better and things like this. And then when you get these types of massive findings, and then you hear the scientists talk about it, you just say, what happened? Like, at which part of playing the telephone game did things go wrong?
Definitely. I had that with one of my studies that, I was at Berkeley and they thought it was cool. So their office, media office, wrote a piece about it. And then it started, the media caught it, right? And then it started appearing in all kinds of places.
To mutate.
With claims that I was like, oh my God. And then people started tweeting about oh, look at this. This is all wrong, relating to my paper. But it was not that my findings were wrong. They were very upset about what the media had made of it. But if you don't go back to the source, people were saying that what I did was all wrong, but the media had wrong what I had done, right? So then I did feel, this is so unfair. I never said that, but I was being attacked for having said that, which I didn't do. So that's definitely how it goes. Yeah, unfortunately.
So I've been criticized for doing these podcasts that they are so long. But, generally speaking, I think there are these complex topics. People are interested in them, and they understand that you cannot understand all of this in 5 minutes. They understand that. It's just, to me, I sometimes think the only people that don't seem to get it is the middleman, aka the media. The receiver gets it. The person investigating gets it. Just the person in the middle doesn't seem to get it. And that's I find this very odd. Very odd. Yeah. But talking a bit more about the research that you do, what are some of the latest findings that you had in your line of research which really excite you?
Oh, from my own?
Yeah, from your own. I mean, we can split it in your own and generally speaking, but I'm more interested in your own.
Right, yeah. So I'm really excited about, so I work a lot at the brain level nowadays, right? And with electrophysiology in general. So, we record the electrical activity of the brain. Neurons use that to communicate, you could say. So the things that I'm excited about are, for example, when I started finding these links in terms of if you look at the signal and what we know the brain is doing in episodic memory tasks, we find the exact same signals when we are doing a language task.
Ooh.
And these things were thought in the hippocampus, for example, right? These things were thought to be exclusive for episodic memory. And now we are finding that it may not be exclusive to episodic memory. When we are using language, the brain is also using these same building blocks, let's say. So that's something that got me really excited. And also once there's damage to the brain for some reason, it could be a tumor, a stroke, those are the ones I'm more familiar with. There's lots of changes happening, more acutely, but also over time, the brain adapts. And the exciting questions, important questions are also like, why do some people recover so well, whereas others don't? Are there certain patterns of adaptation that are more beneficial or not? These are also big questions in the field right now. So we do find some shifts to the right hemisphere once there's damage to the left that could be very meaningful for understanding what this adaptation is.
Right.
So that's also part of what we are going to do more in the future.
Okay, you say adaptation. That's what I used to study. So that sounds super exciting. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So you can, just from what I hear now, you can studying the patient population. It actually tells you quite a lot about how language is processed in the first place, right?
Yeah, depending on how you put the question or how you ask it also, for sure. Because if you know, for example, we have cases, I know there's a certain process I think is going on in language, and now there's someone with damage in that particular brain area and that process is just disrupted entirely. Then it does help us understand the role of that brain area for that process.
Yeah.
Or even if, how do you go from a concept to a label? And if you see that patients have a particular type of deficit, it also helps us understand how it actually is that you go from the concept to the label, for example. So yeah, but I don't, because that's the approach of many people, just using patients to test a model.
Yeah.
And that's not
true.
exactly what I find. I like that, but I also think that we can help answer questions that are more important for these people in turn as well. So I do try to work a bit from both sides and trying to understand the patterns of adaptation that could also be beneficial for the same populations, right? They're providing the data.
You mean like for example, patients that suffer from a stroke, already knowing the patterns of development that they have to go through to recover, and just trying to, let's say, make that as optimal as possible for them.
Right. For example, that would be like the ultimate goal. I don't think, I'm not there for sure, and the field is not there, but that would kind of be the ultimate goal. Like if we know what the good pathways are, can we boost those or try to help them with some kind of therapy that they would go through that path?
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That would be super cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you get the same, when it comes to anything made for patients, you get the doping questions for the healthy population.
Exactly.
It goes immediately there, isn't it? Yeah. Because I would want to know.
Right, exactly. What will make me be even more fluent, right?
Yeah,
I'm
things like that.
Why would you?
Yeah. But no, I think that's pretty cool that you do that. And you're right. Lots of, at least the patient work that I've been reading about, it's about the confirming the models rather than looking at it from the perspective of what can we learn and how can we help those people.
Yeah. But these are very different traditions again, right? So if you look at the cognitive scientists doing fundamental research, most of the time they will use the patients for testing their models, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not happy just doing that. Like it just doesn't satisfy me.
Right.
Me as a researcher to do just that. But that's more me and not a criticism to the field.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, let me backpedal as well a little bit, because I don't mean to dump on those people either. I think this is also just much cooler to do it this way. But of course, that other work is also important to do, except for confirming the models. That's not a good approach. I've never been a fan of that.
Right.
Do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Because there were some questions from people from industry, and I don't think they ever talked to a language scientist before. All right. So I have come across some people who have been just very curious about the effects of capitalizing letters on reading. Do you know something about this direction?
Not really, but would it then be all letters?
Yeah, so for example, you have these different schools of thought that say, schools of thought, air quotes, you have different camps, and one camp says, it's really good to capitalize all letters because then it means like, they make these associations like then you're grown, or if you use all lowercase letters in, let's say, your company name or whatever, you are small, you are young, you are, those things.
Right.
Oh, is there anything?
I know, I don't, but I think it's more of a marketing thing rather than a really language thing, right? Because it's really what will attract the attention.
Right. I mean, I just know I have a lot of problems if everything is in
capital,
capital letter.
Exactly.
I have lots of problems reading.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's way more disruptive.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's research on that, but that's my experience and also what I've heard many people saying also when we are, creating whatever catchy names for our projects, that they say like, just use some lowercase as well. Don't use uppercase for everything because it looks like you're shouting and it's heavy for the reader. So it's more of a marketing thing, but I think from a processing perspective, all uppercase is not very beneficial either.
Yeah. And then they have been thinking of, okay, what if I make every word so let's say you have to write a sentence. Mm-hmm. What if I make every word the first letter capital?
Yeah. Awesome.
Or if I just have the regular way I normally write and only the first, and speaking of the English language,
right.
Only have the first letter of the sentence capital unless I use names and things like that.
But that's also how it's naturally used, right? So I would say unless you're trying to convey something there's a very good reason why you're deviating from that, then don't.
Yeah.
Right. So like these are marked cases, as we call them. Like you're deviating from how it's usually done for a very good reason. But then if you're writing an entire sentence like that, you may be disrupting more than doing good, I would guess.
I would guess as well.
Yeah.
And I guess then it's also language specific because like many more words in German, for example,
all the nouns are with a
more,
capital.
A capital. And I guess if you don't write them in capital.
Yeah, then it's also a statement, right? So like that would be deviating from the default also for a reason. So I would say just stick to the default in the language.
Yeah. So it has nothing to do with some type of language processing model.
Oh, no, I don't think so. You're drawing more attention to certain things by deviating from the default, right?
Yeah.
But then I would say you should use that in the cases when you want to draw particular attention. But if you apply that across the board, you may doing more harm because now everything is receiving attention and you end up not emphasizing anything that you would want to in the first place. So
yeah, I guess you're right. It's I think you can see it more like using a scalpel or a chainsaw. Like you can cut with both, but
right.
Yeah, there's more.
But it's just like you would decorate anything, right? And if you just put that same decoration on every single centimeter on your wall, it stops. It's no longer a decoration.
That's true.
I think it's the same.
Yeah. I would
the
assume
same way of thinking.
Yeah. Nice. Interesting. Thank you. And to all the UX people that hear this, there you go. My final question for you. Which pressing questions in your field, from your perspective, still need to be investigated? Where you think this is where the focus should go?
From what I think, and not what the field thinks.
No, what you think.
Yeah, what I think. Well, can I have two? So
sure.
the one is more in case of brain damage. What are the patterns? The adaptations or the new patterns once it has adapted. What is it even a fair question to say that some are good and some patterns are good and some are not? And can we help people by improving the good or helping them use the good patterns? And from the more fundamental part, I think it can make it very complex, but at a more fundamental level, maybe understanding a bit more once we are using language. It's like these things that we talked about before. It's not naming words or just using words in isolation in a monologue. We're always trying to convey an idea or some thought, and it's an interaction. It's an entire chunk that we are producing. It's not often isolated words. So how do we actually do that? How am I planning my own speech while you're talking to me, right? Like it's all happening at the same time. It's all very fast, very interactive. We know very little about that.
Whoa. And you would assume that we know actually quite a lot, but we don't.
It maybe depends on, exactly. So we do know a lot about interactions themselves, and when you give me the right to speak, right? I pick up on these cues, then now it's my turn.
Yeah.
But on these more, the psychology side of language itself, how am I planning my own speech, my words, putting together my sentences while I'm listening to you, while there's something else going on here, that we don't really know so well.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And exciting.
Yeah, right, definitely. I love it.
For the ones that think it's frustrating that we don't know yet. We were working. You are working on it.
We've been working on it for decades.
Yes.
Like we still don't know it.
But I think it's great. It's really, really good. Yeah. Are there any books or other resources that you can recommend to listeners that want to learn more about what we've talked about?
Oh, God.
Or maybe there are many books. I honestly have no idea.
No, and I should thought about this because I do know you asked this question.
Would you recommend a book by Chomsky?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not really. No, but there's Kenneth's Link.
Kenneth's Link.
Yeah, and that's online.
Yeah.
So it's not a book.
Right.
But they do write about different scientific topics. Okay. And there's someone in particular who likes language a lot. There's a couple of people. And they do write about language many times.
Then I will put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and I will think of a book and then I'll give you a
Can also
name.
be multiple.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
And those, if you know any YouTube videos that we talked about, or maybe you mentioned, I mentioned a lot of it, I know.
Right.
But I will put those in the show notes as well. Well,
cool.
It
was fun.
This was fun. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For people that want to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
If you Google
Twitter
my name, we have also Twitter. If you Google Vitoria Piai, I'm the only Vitoria Piai really present on the internet. So you would immediately find me. So either my email or via my website, you can find contacts there as well.
All right. So I will put your Twitter handle in the show notes, your website, and also your email address. And you have a website for your research group as well, right?
Yeah, but it's not as updated as my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then that will go in there. Well, thanks again for your time. And well, I had a lot of fun.
Me. Yeah, me too.
Thanks. And I actually, there's so much more to talk about. This, I bet, is not the last time.
Oh, cool.
Well, then, thanks again. And to everyone listening, have a great day.
Thanks.
Hey, everyone. Just one more thing before you go. I hope you enjoyed the show. And to stay up to date with future episodes and additional content we share, you can sign up to our blog and you'd get an email every Friday. Why Friday? Because it's almost weekend and we want to give a fun end of the week bonus that you can also talk about during your Friday afternoon drinks. It'll be a short email with our latest updates about bridging the gap between science and UX. The content we share ranges from conversations between UX and science, like we have on this podcast, our own journey from scientists turning into entrepreneurs, all the way to our own studies where we dig deeper into concepts of UX. If you want to receive that to stay in the loop, sign up at mind-trace.com/blog. mind-trace.com/blog.